The exchange program. Professor Nixis adjusted their crystalline sensory arrays as they reviewed the latest addition to their xenobiology class roster. The name stood out like a supernova against the familiar species designations: Dr. Jasmine Patel, Earth, Human. The professor's outer membrane rippled with unease. After 487 cycles of teaching at the Galactic Institute of Advanced Sciences, they had encountered every known sentient species in the Federation. But humans? They were new. Unpredictable. And now, thanks to the Institute's progressive exchange program, sitting in their advanced xenobiology class. Professor? Their assistant, a vaporous Nebulian named Zephyr, materialized beside their desk. The new term begins in 3 microcycles. Should I activate the universal translators? Yes, Nixis waved a crystalline appendage dismissively. And double-check the atmospheric modulators. Our human student will need that primitive oxygen-nitrogen mix they're so fond of. The lecture hall filled gradually. Crystalline luminarians took their usual spots near the light wells, their faceted bodies refracting the morning glow. A cluster of Nebulians hovered near the ceiling, their gaseous forms swirling with anticipation. The arthropodian crick students clicked their way to their designated spots, their compound eyes swiveling to take in everything. Then she walked in. Dr. Jasmine Patel moved with the peculiar bipedal gait of her species, but there was an unmistakable grace to her movements. She wore the standard researcher's robe of the Institute, modified to accommodate her human form. Her dark eyes scanned the room with obvious curiosity and, was that amusement? Welcome, class, Nixis began, their crystalline form shimming with academic authority. This term, we have the unique opportunity to study various planetary ecosystems, including some recently discovered biomes. We also welcome our first human exchange student, Dr. Patel. All sensory organs turned toward Jasmine, who smiled and gave a small wave. Thank you, Professor. I'm looking forward to sharing perspectives on interplanetary biology. Indeed, Nixis continued. Now, for your term projects, each student will select a species from their homeworld to present to the class. The focus should be on behavioral patterns, ecological impact, and evolutionary adaptations. The selections began. A luminarian chose to study their world's crystal-consuming lithophages. A Nebulian opted for gas-filtering organisms from their atmospheric home. The Crix representatives selected their planet's largest insectoid herbivores. When it came to Jasmine's turn, her smile widened just slightly. I'd like to study Earth's hippopotamuses, Professor. Nixis's crystalline structure vibrated with mild confusion. The large grazing mammals? Surely you'd prefer something more significant? Perhaps one of your world's apex predators? Oh, no, Jasmine replied, her voice carrying an undertone that Nixis couldn't quite interpret. Hippos will be perfect. They're herbivores, after all. Perfectly harmless plant-eaters. Something about the way she emphasized those last words sent a slight tremor through Nixis's crystalline matrix. They noticed several Nebulian students condensing nervously, perhaps picking up on something in the human's tone that Nixis had missed. Very well, Nixis conceded. Though I must remind you that this is an advanced course. We'll be expecting detailed analysis of behavioral patterns and ecological impact, not just basic biological functions. Oh, don't worry, Professor, Jasmine replied, tapping something into her data pad. I plan to cover their behavior very thoroughly. Especially their territorial displays and social interactions. As the class continued, Nixis couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. Later, reviewing the day's recordings, they noticed something curious. Every time the word herbivore was mentioned, Dr. Patel's vital signs showed slight spikes of what the medical database identified as suppressed amusement. What could possibly be so entertaining about plant-eating mammals? Nixis dismissed the thought. After all, how surprising could Earth's herbivores really be? In the coming weeks, they would learn the answer to that question. And nothing in their 487 cycles of teaching could have prepared them for it. Research and revelations. The first signs of trouble appeared during week 3 of the term. Professor Nixis was reviewing student progress reports when Zephyr materialized in their office, the Nebulian's gaseous form swirling with obvious distress. "Professor, we may have a situation with the xenobiology database," Zephyr's particles condensed anxiously. "Several students have reported discrepancies in the Earth fauna classifications." Discrepancies? Nixis's crystalline structure vibrated with concern. "Our databases are cross-referenced with multiple galactic archives." "What kind of discrepancies?" "Well," Zephyr hesitated, "it's about the mortality rates associated with Earth's herbivorous species. Particularly, the hippopotamus." Nixis noticed their assistant seemed to whisper the last word, as if afraid to speak it at full volume. "Surely you're overreacting. They're plant-eaters, Zephyr. How dangerous could they be?" Just then, a Crick student burst into the office, their exoskeleton clicking rapidly in agitation. "Professor. I was helping Dr. Patel with her research and... The student's mandibles quivered. "Is it true these creatures can bite a small watercraft in half?" Now, Nixis attempted to sound reassuring, "I'm sure there's a perfectly logical explanation. Perhaps the data was corrupted, or there was a translation error." "Oh, no error," Dr. Patel's voice came from the doorway, where she stood holding a data pad. "Would you like to see some footage? I just received some excellent recordings from a colleague at the Kruger National Park." The Crick student skittered behind Nixis's desk. "Perhaps another time," Nixis said hastily, noting their assistant's gaseous form had retreated to the ceiling corners. "Dr. Patel, while we appreciate thoroughness in research, we should focus on the herbivorous aspects of your chosen species." "Oh, but this is about their herbivorous behavior." Jasmine's eyes sparkled with that now familiar glint. "This footage shows them clearing a path to their favorite grazing spots. It's quite impressive how they deal with obstacles, like crocodiles, boats, and the occasional vehicle." Over the next few days, strange incidents began multiplying across the xenobiology department. A group of Luminarian students required crystalline structure stabilization after witnessing what they described as territorial behavior footage. 3 Nebulian students had to be reconstituted after their gaseous forms dispersed in shock during a data review session. Professor Nixis found their inbox flooded with concerned messages. "Is it normal for Earth herbivores to display such aggressive territorial behaviors? Why do they need that much bite force to eat plants? Please confirm if speed calculations are correct. No animal that large should move that fast underwater." During class discussions, Nixis noticed a troubling pattern. Whenever other students presented their research on peaceful plant-eaters from their home worlds, Dr. Patel would smile that mysterious smile and add helpful, comparative facts about hippopotamuses. "Your crystal-grazing lithophages are fascinating," she told a Luminarian presenter. "Did you know hippos can't actually swim? They're so dense with muscle they just run along the bottom of rivers. Speaking of which, I have some footage." The Luminarian excused themselves from class immediately, claiming their crystalline matrix needed emergency realignment. Even the normally stoic Crick students began showing signs of stress. During their presentation on giant herbivorous insects, one mentioned territorial displays, only to have Jasmine cheerfully interject with hippopotamus territorial marking behaviors. The resulting description sent 2 Cricks into premature molting. Nixis tried to maintain order, but the damage was spreading. Students began requesting remote attendance options. The medical bay reported an increase in anxiety-related visits. Someone started a support group for xenobiologists traumatized by Earth wildlife data. Through it all, Dr. Patel continued her research with unsettling enthusiasm. Nixis once overheard her talking with her Earth colleagues via quantum comm. "You should see their faces when I tell them about hippo dentition. No, I haven't shown them the territorial marking footage yet. Yes, I'm saving the baby hippo videos for the final presentation. Trust me, it's going to be epic. The professor found themselves obsessively reviewing Earth wildlife classifications. How had they missed this? How had the entire galactic scientific community categorized these creatures as non-threatening herbivores? The answer came during an emergency department meeting, when a junior researcher made a crucial observation: all our initial Earth wildlife studies were conducted from orbit. We based our classifications on observed feeding behaviors and dental structures. Nobody actually went down to the surface to interact with the specimens. Nixus's crystalline form shuddered as they realized the implications. Their entire understanding of Earth's ecosystem might need revision. And Dr. Patel's final presentation was scheduled for next week. Perhaps, Nixus announced to the faculty, we should install additional emergency exits in the lecture hall. And reinforce the atmospheric barriers. And maybe update our medical response protocols. In their office, Jasmine Patel added the finishing touches to her presentation, humming quietly to herself. On her data pad, a message from Earth flashed: "Did you tell them about the Bite Force statistics yet?" Saving the best for last, she typed back, grinning. "Just wait until they learn about hippo daycare centers." The presentation that changed everything. The day of Dr. Patel's presentation arrived with an atmosphere of barely contained panic. Professor Nixus had taken every possible precaution. Emergency force fields were triple-checked, medical response teams stood by in each corner, and every student had been issued personal shield generators. The lecture hall, usually packed, was half empty. Those brave enough to attend had positioned themselves near the exits. The Nebulian students hovered closer to the ventilation shafts than usual, ready for a quick gaseous escape. The remaining cricks huddled together, their exoskeletons reinforced with extra plating. "Before we begin," Nixus announced, their crystalline form carefully positioned behind a protective barrier, "I remind everyone that the emergency teleporters are fully charged. The trauma counselors are on standby, and..." "Thank you, Professor." Jasmine stepped up to the presentation platform, smiling that now infamous smile. "I've prepared what I think will be a very educational experience for everyone." The room's temperature dropped several degrees as every species capable of sweating began doing so. "The hippopotamus," Jasmine began, pulling up her first slide, "is often considered one of Earth's most remarkable herbivores. But numbers don't tell the whole story. So I brought video footage." The main screen flickered to life, showing a peaceful African waterway. Several students relaxed slightly. The scene was serene, gentle ripples, birds chirping, a beautiful sunset. Then the water erupted. 2 tons of muscle and territorial determination burst from beneath the surface like a biological torpedo. The hippo's mouth gaped open, revealing teeth that suddenly seemed less herbivorous and more like nature's own daggers. 3 Luminarian students developed stress fractures. A Nebulian student condensed so rapidly they had to be caught in an emergency containment field. "That boat was reinforced aluminum," Jasmine commented casually as they watched the hippo's jaws crush the vessel. "The passengers were fine though." "Well, mostly fine. They learned a valuable lesson about respecting wildlife." The lights flickered as a Luminarian student's panic disrupted the power grid. "Oh, perfect." Jasmine beamed. "Now we can see the night footage better." What followed was what she called a typical territorial dispute resolution between neighboring hippos. The display of aquatic dominance caused 2 crick students to molt on the spot. "Notice the jaw strength," Jasmine narrated enthusiastically. "A hippo can exert enough force to crush a watermelon like a grape." "Speaking of which..." "No demonstrations," came the collective cry from the remaining conscious students. "Now, let's talk about locomotion," Jasmine continued, seemingly oblivious to the growing hysteria. "Hippos don't actually swim. They run underwater. The footage showed a hippo keeping pace with a motorboat, its massive legs propelling it through the water with terrifying speed. They can maintain this pace for quite a while, she added helpfully. And they can hold their breath for up to 5 minutes. Really keeps their neighbors guessing. But they're herbivores, a trembling voice called from the back. Why do they need to chase anything? Jasmine grinned. Oh, they don't hunt for food. This is just how they enforce their personal space. Speaking of which, wait until you see their territory-marking behavior. The next sequence of footage caused mass hysteria. The room watched in horror as they learned exactly how a hippo marks its territory. The rapid tail movement, the spectacular distribution of materials, the sheer radius of effect. A Crick student began stress-shedding their exoskeleton. 2 Nebulians had to be prevented from escaping through the air vents. And here's the best part, Jasmine continued, her eyes sparkling. All this aggression? It's not even because they're angry. This is just how they are. They do this whether they're feeling threatened or just mildly inconvenienced. Sometimes they do it for fun. The medical team began administering calming agents to the audience. Now, let's discuss their social structure, she said, pulling up new footage. Here's a lovely scene of a mother hippo teaching her calf how to properly respond to threats. What followed was a master class in aquatic dominance. The baby hippo, which several students had initially cooed at, demonstrated that it had inherited its parents' talent for territorial enforcement. A crocodile learned this lesson the hard way. They're born ready, Jasmine explained proudly. Baby hippos have been known to charge boats when they're just a few weeks old. Isn't that adorable? By this point, the medical emergency team had set up a triage station in the back of the classroom. Several students were receiving trauma counseling. One luminarian had crystallized into their base mineral form out of pure shock. Professor Nixis finally found their voice. Thank you, Dr. Patel, for that enlightening presentation. Would anyone like to ask questions? Every student simultaneously shook their head, sensory appendage, or equivalent body part. Great presentation, right? Jasmine looked around the traumatized classroom with genuine enthusiasm. Next week, I was thinking of doing a bonus presentation about another fascinating Earth herbivore, the Cape buffalo. They're really interesting, especially when they decide to get revenge on lions. The sound of mass evacuation drowned out the rest of her sentence. As students fled the lecture hall, Jasmine pulled out her data pad. Her message home was simple: mission accomplished. You were right, xenobiology class will never be the same. Professor Nixis, watching their students flee, couldn't help but wonder, if these were Earth's herbivores, what were humans themselves capable of? Perhaps, they realized with a shudder, they didn't want to know. Ripple effects. News of Dr. Patel's presentation spread through the Galactic Institute like a quantum wave collapse. Within days, the xenobiology department's findings triggered a chain reaction across every scientific discipline. The Galactic Security Council called an emergency session. High Commissioner Vorex, their plasma form flickering with agitation, addressed the assembled representatives. We need to completely reassess Earth's threat classification. If their herbivores are this formidable, we clearly underestimated the entire biosphere. Meanwhile, at the Institute's faculty lounge, Professor Nixis found themselves surrounded by colleagues seeking answers. Professor Quantum, head of physics, had questions about hippo underwater locomotion. The energy requirements alone should make it impossible, they insisted, their quantum form fluctuating wildly. How does a creature that massive achieve such speeds without anti-gravity technology? The engineering department was equally disturbed. Their structural integrity makes no sense, Professor Hayerix complained, their mechanical components whirring anxiously. We've analyzed the footage. Those teeth shouldn't be able to withstand that kind of force without breaking. What are they made of? The psychology department had to establish new counseling protocols. We've had students requesting memory suppression, reported Dr. Mindweave, their psychic tendrils curling in distress. Especially after learning about the territorial marking behaviors. Dr. Patel, meanwhile, had become something of a celebrity. Other departments began requesting guest lectures, though attendance remained strictly voluntary. The Military Science Academy expressed particular interest, much to everyone's concern. The Institute's database administrators worked overtime updating Earth's wildlife classifications. The previous entry for hippopotamus, large herbivorous grazer, minimal threat, was replaced with a new warning, extreme caution, approach at own risk. Previous classification severely understated territorial aggression and physical capabilities. But it was the diplomatic implications that truly shook the galactic community. The Federation's diplomatic corps frantically revised their Earth protocols. "We've been sending them the wrong signals entirely," Ambassador Lightweave realized during an emergency briefing. "We thought their polite behavior indicated timidity. What if they've just been tolerant?" The media coverage spread faster than a supernova. Headlines across the galaxy screamed, "Earth herbivores, the shocking truth. Galactic scientists admit, we got Earth all wrong. Top 10 reasons to never visit an Earth waterway." Some news outlets obtained copies of Dr. Patel's presentation footage. The resulting broadcast caused the first-ever galaxy-wide ratings warning: content may be disturbing to viewers of all species. Viewer discretion strongly advised. The Galactic Library had to create a new classification system just for Earth's wildlife documents. "We can't just label them herbivore or carnivore anymore," the chief archivist explained, their data crystals pulsing with frustration. "Earth species don't follow our normal categories. We need a new designation for looks harmless but will absolutely ruin your day." Even the entertainment industry was affected. A popular virtual reality company had to recall their Earth Safari program after learning their hippo simulations were dangerously inaccurate. The updated version came with triple the safety warnings and required signed waivers. Back at the Institute, Professor Nixis noticed a subtle but significant change in how other species interacted with Dr. Patel. The initial fear and shock had evolved into something more complex, respect tinged with wary admiration. After all, humans hadn't just survived alongside these creatures, they'd thrived. "I don't understand," a Nebulian student confessed during office hours. "How do humans remain so calm about all this?" "Oh, that's not even our most impressive herbivore," Dr. Patel replied cheerfully. "Wait until you learn about moose. Did you know they can dive up to 6 meters underwater to feed? And they actively seek out confrontations with vehicles larger than themselves." The student promptly dispersed in panic, requiring emergency reconstitution. As the galactic community struggled to process this new understanding of Earth's harmless wildlife, a deeper realization began to sink in: they had fundamentally misunderstood not just Earth's ecosystem, but humanity itself. Any species that could evolve alongside such creatures and consider them normal had to be far more formidable than anyone had imagined. A new understanding. The end of the academic term brought changes nobody could have predicted. Professor Nixis sat in their office, reviewing the aftermath of what students had begun calling the hippopotamus incident. Their crystalline form hummed softly as they read the latest reports. The Galactic Institute had completely revamped its Earth Studies program. Understanding Terran Wildlife, a survival guide, became a mandatory course for all xenobiology students. The registration came with a mandatory psychological evaluation and signed liability waiver. Dr. Patel had been offered a permanent position as special consultant on terrestrial life forms. She accepted on one condition: that she could bring visual aids. The medical bay immediately requested a budget increase. "Professor?" Zephyr materialized cautiously. "The Galactic Council's Education Committee is here for their inspection." Nixis vibrated with anticipation. After Dr. Patel's presentation went viral, the Council had taken an unprecedented interest in Earth's educational exchange program. Not to shut it down, as some expected, but to expand it. If this is what their herbivores are like, Council member Starweave had declared, imagine what we could learn from their predators. From their survivors. From their warriors. The Council delegation entered, led by High Commissioner Vorex. Their plasma form crackled with authority. Professor Nixis, we've reviewed your department's findings. Your work has revolutionized our understanding of Earth. Dr. Patel deserves the credit, Nixis responded modestly. She merely showed us what we should have seen all along. Yes, about that, Vorex's plasma swirled thoughtfully. We've been reviewing all our assumptions about Earth. If their herbivores demonstrate such impressive capabilities, we clearly need to reassess everything. A junior council member floated forward, their energy form pulsing nervously. The military implications alone. These humans evolved on a world where even their plant eaters are apex predators. Their entire planet is essentially a death world by our standards. And they consider this normal. Which brings us to our purpose here, Vorex continued. The Council has approved a major expansion of the exchange program. We want more human instructors. More human perspectives. We need to understand how they think, how they survive, how they... The commissioner's voice trailed off as Dr. Patel walked past the office, cheerfully carrying what appeared to be a data crystal labeled, Cape Buffalo, Nature's Revenge Artists. Perhaps, Vorex added hastily, we should start with something less intense. Their agriculture methods, maybe? Surely their plants are safe. Dr. Patel poked her head into the office. Oh, speaking of plants, I'm giving a guest lecture next week on the Venus flytrap. Did you know we have carnivorous plants? They're fascinating. I have some wonderful footage of them digesting their prey. 3 council members immediately excused themselves, citing urgent business elsewhere in the galaxy. As the delegation departed, Nixis reflected on how much had changed. Their students no longer saw humans as simply another spacefaring species. They saw them as beings who had not only survived but thrived on a world that would give most galactic citizens nightmares. A species that casually coexisted with creatures that defied classification, that broke the rules of what should be possible. The Institute's motto had always been, understanding brings unity. Now, thanks to one presentation about supposedly peaceful herbivores, the galaxy understood humanity better than ever before. They understood that humans weren't just another intelligent species. They were survivors, adaptable and resilient beyond imagination. Later that evening, Nixis found Dr. Patel in the faculty lounge, preparing for her next lecture. I've been meaning to ask, Nixis ventured, why hippopotamuses? Of all Earth species, why choose them for your presentation? Jasmine smiled that now famous smile. Professor, sometimes the best way to understand a world isn't by looking at its obvious dangers. It's by looking at what that world considers normal. Besides, she added, her eyes twinkling, I thought about doing my presentation on Canadian geese, but I didn't want to cause a galactic panic. Nixis's crystalline form shuddered. They didn't know what a Canadian goose was, and after the hippopotamus revelation, they decided they didn't want to find out. As if reading their mind, Jasmine grinned. Don't worry, Professor. There's plenty of time for advanced Earth zoology next semester. Wait until they learn about honey badgers. Somewhere in the distance, a Nebulian student who happened to be passing by immediately dispersed in preemptive panic. Just another normal day at the Galactic Institute, where one word, hippopotamus, had changed everything.